no birth, no death, what the Buddha really meant. Chapter 1. Facing the fear of ceasing to exist. There's a silence that echoes within us all, a quiet murmur beneath the hum of daily life. It doesn't always scream. Often, it whispers. In the sterile light of hospital rooms, in the final moments of a funeral, in the middle of the night, when the world is still and you're alone with your thoughts. It's the fear of ceasing, of vanishing. It's the haunting notion that one day, everything we are, our laughter, our regrets, our names, our fingerprints on the hearts of others, will simply dissolve, as if we never existed. This fear doesn't discriminate. It clutches at both the old and the young, the skeptic and the spiritual, the confident and the fragile. And it hides itself well beneath ambition, routine, distraction. But it's there. Why does the idea of death disturb us so deeply? On the surface, it seems obvious. We don't want to lose what we love. We don't want to become nothing. But beneath that fear lies a belief so fundamental, we rarely even notice it's there. The belief that life begins at birth, ends at death, and in between, there's me, solid, separate, enduring. We live our lives as if we were light switches, flipped on at birth, flipped off at death. Alive, then gone. And because we think this way, we cling. We cling to youth, to identity, to relationships, to memories, fighting desperately against the inevitability of their fading. But what if that entire framework is flawed? What if our terror doesn't arise from reality, but from a misunderstanding of it? What if birth and death are not solid doors, but passing thresholds in a river that never truly stops flowing? This is the very insight from which Buddhist wisdom begins. Not with dogma, not with a promise of paradise, but with a radical invitation: look again, look deeper, strip away what you assume to be true, and examine the raw fabric of experience. The Buddha didn't ask us to believe. He urged us to investigate. He didn't claim to possess exclusive truths, but offered tools for seeing reality as it truly is, without the filters of fear or habit. His declaration that there is no true birth and there is no true death is not a riddle to confuse, but a mirror held up to our assumptions. To our rational minds, this may seem absurd. Of course people are born. Of course they die. We see it all the time. Birth certificates, funeral rites, graves with names etched in stone. But the insight here isn't about denying appearances. It's about questioning permanence. It's about asking, what is actually beginning? What is actually ending? Let's begin with the body, the most tangible part of our identity. You likely feel your body is yours. It ages with you, breathes with you, aches with you. But even your body isn't stable. Scientists tell us that within a span of about 7 to 10 years, almost every cell in your body is replaced. The you that existed a decade ago doesn't exist anymore, at least not physically. And yet, you remain. Now look at your emotions. Do they stay the same? Joy surges and disappears. Anger comes and goes like a summer storm. Thoughts arise, swirl, and vanish, never stopping, never sticking. We are not a fixed sculpture. We are a dance of changing conditions. Yet despite all of this impermanence, we behave as if there is a fixed me at the center of it all, a pilot in the cockpit of the body, steering through life, untouched by the turbulence outside. This belief in a fixed self, unchanging, central, eternal, is not just a philosophical curiosity. According to the Buddha, it's the very root of suffering. Why? Because when we believe in permanence, we resist what is true. We grieve not just because things change, but because we thought they wouldn't. We suffer not only because someone left, but because we clung to the idea they should stay. We imagine that by grasping tightly enough onto youth, success, security, we can outrun impermanence. But we can't. And the harder we try, the more fearful we become. The shadow of loss lengthens behind everything we love. But here's the paradox. It's not change that causes suffering. It's our refusal to accept it. This is why the insight, no birth, no death, is not a denial of existence, but a reframing of it. It's a shift in perspective, from seeing life as a straight line between two bookends, to seeing it as a pattern of emergence, transformation, and continuation. Consider the wave in the ocean. When it rises, we call it birth. When it falls, we call it death. But the wave was never separate from the water. It had a form, yes, but no independent substance. And even when it crashes, its essence remains within the ocean. Can it really be said to have ended? So too with us. We are not bubbles isolated in space. We are the unfolding of causes and conditions. Our breath linked to trees, our thoughts shaped by culture, our body born of stardust. To say we begin at birth and end at death is like claiming a flame begins when it touches a candle and ends when it burns out. But where did the heat go? Where did the light disappear? Understanding this doesn't make grief go away. We still lose those we love. We still feel the ache of parting. But it changes the quality of that grief. It softens it. It allows space for reverence, for seeing that nothing is ever truly lost, only changed. And perhaps more importantly, it opens the door to living fully. Because when we're no longer paralyzed by the fear of an ending, we can finally pay attention to the present moment, not as something slipping away, but as something sacred. So we ask again, what is this self we fear losing? Where is it exactly? Is it the body, the thoughts, the memories? Or is it something more fluid, more mysterious, something that cannot be grasped, yet animates everything? This question doesn't need an immediate answer. It only needs your willingness to look, to pause, to breathe, to investigate, not with anxiety, but with wonder. Because the truth is, liberation begins not when we conquer death, but when we stop pretending that we ever had to. Chapter 2. The 3 gateways to liberation: change, emptiness, interdependence. If the fear of death is rooted in a misunderstanding, then how do we begin to see clearly? What are the keys that unlock this deeper vision? The one the Buddha described as freedom beyond fear, beyond clinging, beyond false identity. There are 3 gates. Not gates in the physical sense, but doorways of understanding that allow us to walk out of illusion and into reality. Each of these truths is simple to hear, yet profound in its implications. Together, they dismantle the illusion of a fixed self, and with it, the terror of ending. Let's begin with the first, impermanence. 1. Impermanence. Everything is in motion. The Buddha declared, all conditioned things are impermanent. This isn't a mystical statement. It's observational. Look around you. Everything changes. Seasons pass. Buildings age. Friendships shift. Even mountains are eroded by wind and time. Now turn that gaze inward. Your body is a river of transformation. Bones, skin, blood, all regenerating, decaying, reshaping over time. The you that existed at age 7 is physically gone, and yet you are here. Why? Because identity is not a fixed structure, it's a flowing process. Emotions, too, change. Joy arises and fades. Anxiety peaks, then dissolves. Anger flares, then cools. We say, I'm sad, but that sadness isn't who you are. It's something passing through, like weather. The suffering arises not from the changing itself, but from our expectation of stability. We suffer because we cling to things as if they will last forever, when in truth, they are already on their way out. It's like holding onto a snowflake. The tighter your grip, the faster it melts. But impermanence isn't just about loss. It's also the very reason growth is possible. If you were fixed, unchanging, you could never evolve. You would be trapped in your worst moment. Instead, because you change, you can forgive, heal, start over. Impermanence is not your enemy. It's your liberation. 2. No self, the illusion of a fixed I. From impermanence comes the second insight, anatta, or no self. In the West, the self is often imagined as a soul, a personality, a consciousness housed inside the body like a pilot in a cockpit. We say, this is my body, my thoughts, my life, as if there's a separate, unchanging me behind the scenes. But the Buddha asked a radical question. Where is this self you speak of? He broke it down into 5 components, what we call the 5 aggregates: form, the body, sensation, feelings, perception, mental formations, like thoughts, intentions, and consciousness, awareness. These 5 constantly arise and pass away. They're interdependent and unstable, yet we stitch them together and call the patchwork me. Imagine a chariot. It has wheels, an axle, a seat. But take each part apart. Do you still have a chariot? Or do you just have parts? Likewise, take apart the 5 aggregates. Do you still find a self? Or do you find only processes? This isn't to say you don't exist. Rather, it means you don't exist in the way you think you do. You're not an object. You're a phenomenon, a process, a happening. The self is not a thing, it's a story. And once you see that, the story becomes optional. No self doesn't mean you disappear. It means you stop mistaking the mask for the face. You begin to relate to life with curiosity rather than control. You stop defending an identity that doesn't need defending. And in that spaciousness, fear begins to soften. Because if there is no fixed you, then who exactly is it that dies? 3. Dependent origination. Nothing exists alone. The third gateway ties everything together. Dependent origination, paticca samuppada. This is the understanding that everything arises because of causes and conditions. Nothing appears in isolation. Nothing stands by itself. Think of a plant. It grows from a seed, but it doesn't grow alone. It needs sunlight, water, soil, time. Remove one, and the plant cannot thrive. Or think of a thought. You didn't invent it from nowhere. It came from past experiences, sensory inputs, emotions, memories, language. Your mind is not a solo creator. It's a collaborator with existence. This is not just ecology. It's identity. You are not an isolated ego. You are the intersection of 1,000 threads. Your parents, your culture, the food you eat, the books you read, the breaths you take. In this light, the idea of being born from nothing or dying into nothing makes little sense. You didn't start from nowhere, and you won't end in nowhere. You are woven into the fabric of the universe. When your body ends, its elements return. When your mind releases, its momentum carries forward through karmic continuity. Even pain, joy, and suffering follow this law. Suffering does not happen to you. It arises when the conditions are there: craving, clinging, ignorance. Remove the conditions, and suffering dissolves. This principle is empowering, because it means we're not at the mercy of fate. We can shape conditions. We can uproot ignorance. We can plant compassion. We can train the mind. And we can stop seeing birth and death as isolated eruptions in an empty void. They are links in a vast, flowing chain. Taken together, these three gateways form the heart of the Buddhist path. Impermanence shows us that change is the nature of all things. No self reveals that there's no solid I at the center of experience. Dependent origination reminds us that everything is interconnected and co-created. When you see through these lenses, the fear of death begins to transform. It doesn't vanish overnight, but it loses its sharp edge. You begin to sense that you were never truly separate, that you were never truly at risk of being lost. Because how can something that never stood alone ever truly disappear? We don't need to fear change. We need to understand it. We don't need to fight impermanence. We need to flow with it. And we don't need to cling to an identity that was never fixed. We need to awaken to the truth that we are not nouns. We are verbs. Living, moving, breathing verbs in the poetry of reality. Chapter 3. Rebirth without a traveler. The flow of karmic momentum. If we are not fixed beings, if the self is not solid, if everything is impermanent and dependent on conditions, then one question naturally arises. What, exactly, continues after death? This question has puzzled spiritual seekers for centuries. If there is no self, no enduring soul, then how can there be rebirth? Who is reborn? Isn't that a contradiction? To the Western mind, which often views the self like a container, holding memories, thoughts, and identity, the idea of rebirth without a soul can feel confusing, even impossible. We're used to imagining that something travels from one life to the next, carrying our essence forward like a suitcase of memories. But in Buddhism, rebirth is not the transfer of a thing. It is the continuation of a process. A ripple, not a passenger. A flow, not a fixed object. This is the subtle but radical teaching that redefines what we mean when we talk about you. Let's begin by stepping back from metaphysics and looking at something we all understand: a flame. Picture a candle burning. When you use that candle to light another, what happens? The flame appears to jump, but does anything actually move from one candle to the next? Not really. The second flame arises because the right conditions came together: heat, wick, oxygen. There is continuity, but not a thing that travels. Just the arising of energy in a new form. Rebirth, in Buddhist understanding, works the same way. There is no immortal soul jumping between bodies. No spark being transported through the heavens. Instead, there is karma, intentional action, and the residue it leaves behind. That residue, that energetic imprint, gives rise to a new stream of consciousness when the conditions are right. Not because of fate, not because of punishment, but because of cause and effect. Just as a seed doesn't turn into a tree in an instant, your karmic momentum doesn't vanish at death. It continues, not as a self, but as a force, as a tendency, as a pattern. This is often called the stream of becoming. It's like a river. The water at one bend is not the same as the water downstream, but the flow is continuous. The river's shape may shift, its banks may widen or narrow, but it moves because of gravity, terrain, and the sheer momentum of movement. Your consciousness is like that river, constantly renewing, influenced by past actions, but not reducible to any one drop of experience. Some find this disconcerting. If there's no soul, no core me, how can I care about rebirth? But perhaps we're asking the wrong question. Instead of, what will happen to me after I die? Try asking, what kind of energy am I releasing into the world? Your words ripple beyond you. Your actions plant seeds in minds you may never meet again. Your presence leaves impressions. And according to Buddhist teachings, these impressions, especially those rooted in strong intention, form the karmic energy that continues. It's not about carrying a self. It's about carrying a tendency. A powerful metaphor used in the Buddhist tradition is that of the seal and the wax. When you press a seal into soft wax, it leaves a distinct imprint. The seal doesn't enter the wax. It doesn't leave any part of itself behind. But the pattern it leaves is real, and it can be seen, felt, and passed on. In the same way, your actions leave impressions on the flow of consciousness. When the body dissolves, those karmic imprints remain in the stream, ready to condition the next arising of mind and form. Now, let's bring this closer to the moment of death. According to the Buddha, the last moment of consciousness before death plays a crucial role. Whatever karmic tendencies are most dominant at that moment, especially those that have been nurtured repeatedly during life, become the seed for the next moment of consciousness. And that next moment arises as what we call rebirth. There is no time gap. There is no entity flying through space. There is simply continuity, like the instant one violin note fades and another begins, with no silence between. What arises next depends on the strength and nature of the karmic momentum. This is why mindfulness in life, and especially near death, is emphasized. The mind, like a tuning fork, vibrates in harmony with the energies it has practiced the most. Some teachers describe this transition like one candle lighting another. Others compare it to a wave passing through a field, triggering a pattern to arise in a new location. But all agree, nothing is transmitted, and yet continuity remains. To believe that a soul moves from body to body is to reintroduce the very thing Buddhism tries to liberate us from, attachment to a permanent self. And yet, the idea of nothing continuing also misses the point. Rebirth is not annihilation, and it's not continuation of identity. It's the perpetuation of causes. When you throw a stone in a pond, the stone may sink, but the ripples continue long after. In the same way, your habits, your intentions, your kindness, your cruelty send ripples into existence. You may not continue as a you, but the impact of your being does. So what does this mean for us, here and now? It means our actions matter. It means our choices have weight, not because they are judged, but because they are recorded by the very fabric of reality. It means you're not trapped by your past, but you are responsible for your future, not your next life, even your next moment. Because every action is a link in a chain, and every link leads somewhere. Most importantly, it means we are never alone. We are inheritors of the past and creators of the future. What we do now echoes far beyond what we can see. And in that recognition, a subtle shift happens. The question, what will become of me after I die, fades, and is replaced by something more powerful. How shall I live, knowing that nothing is truly mine, and yet everything I touch is changed by my touch? This is the path not of fear, but of freedom, not of metaphysical speculation, but of profound ethical clarity. Rebirth is not about escaping death. It's about recognizing life as a continuum of influence and choosing, with wisdom, what you pass forward. Chapter 4. Death as Dissolution, Not Disappearance. We've seen how the self is not fixed. We've explored how rebirth doesn't require a soul to travel, but only the momentum of causes and conditions. But now, we arrive at the moment that confronts all of us, perhaps the most feared threshold of human life. Death. What is death, really? To most of us, it feels like an abyss. A drop-off. A full stop. When someone dies, we speak of them as gone. Disappeared. Erased. We say they were here, and now they aren't. As if a light was switched off, and nothing remains. But is this what death truly is? The Buddha offered another view. A view not built on hope or denial, but on close observation of how reality functions. In his teachings, death is not destruction. It is transformation. To understand this, let's return to the basics. What are we, at our most visible level? We are made of elements. Earth, water, fire, air. This body is not a miracle from nowhere. It's a temporary gathering of these elements in balance. When death comes, the balance dissolves. The body does not vanish, it returns. It falls back into the cycle of nature. Skin becomes soil. Breath becomes air. Warmth becomes atmosphere. Bones become mineral. Death, from this view, is not the opposite of life. It's part of its rhythm. Just as the wave returns to the ocean, the body returns to the earth. We see this process all around us. A tree dies and becomes fuel for new saplings. A fallen leaf feeds the soil. Nothing is lost. It only moves. But what about the mind? Here, things become more subtle. Science can trace the neurons. It can scan the brain, measure electrical activity, record the pulse of life. But when the final breath leaves the body and the brain stills, something slips away, something that's hard to name, harder to hold. In Buddhist teaching, this is consciousness, not as a soul, but as a stream, a process. It's not a fixed entity, but a flow of awareness, arising moment by moment in dependence on conditions. When the body weakens, when the senses begin to fail, the more surface levels of consciousness, the ones tied to seeing, hearing, thinking, begin to fade. But beneath those lies a deeper continuity, a latent stream, one that carries not memories, but tendencies, one that's shaped not by ego, but by karma. And unless full liberation has been attained, unless all craving, ignorance, and identity have been dissolved, this stream continues, not as a soul, but as the next unfolding of life. Imagine a whirlpool in a river. It forms where currents meet, where water spins into shape. It seems solid. It has form, motion, even force. But is it a thing? No. It is a process, dependent on the water, the terrain, the flow. And when the flow changes, the whirlpool vanishes. Not because it died, but because the conditions for its appearance no longer exist. So too with death. The whirlpool that was you dissolves. But the river flows on. This idea can be unsettling. After all, we want death to mean something. We want it to be either an ending or a glorious continuation. But Buddhism offers something more honest. Death is neither a black hole nor a passport. It is a change of form. Think of a block of ice. When it melts, it becomes water. When heated, it becomes vapor. Did it die? Or did it just shift state? The same holds for our existence. The body and mind are impermanent forms, expressions of causes and conditions. At death, those forms shift, but the energy behind them, the karma that shaped them, does not evaporate. It continues as the foundation for a new formation. Science, of course, is cautious here. It acknowledges the conservation of mass and energy. Nothing material is lost. Everything is rearranged. But what about awareness? What about the part of us that watches, questions, feels? There is no scientific consensus here. Only hypotheses. Only silence. And that's where Buddhist insight steps in, not as a final answer, but as a deeper kind of question. What if death is not disappearance, but recycling? What if we are not erased, but reintegrated? You don't need to believe this blindly. Just look at the world. Everything transforms. Nothing is wasted. Even the stars die, but in doing so, they seed galaxies. Their death is the birthplace of new worlds. So why would we be any different? This understanding can change how we live. When we no longer fear being erased, we begin to live more gently. We let go of the desperation to leave a legacy. We stop clinging to permanence. We accept that what matters is not the length of our life, but the quality of our presence while we're here. Death is not something to be defeated. It's something to be understood. The Buddhist path teaches us not to fight death, but to befriend it. Not to obsess over when or how it will happen, but to understand its nature now, so that when the time comes, we are not paralyzed. We are prepared, not in fear, but in clarity. A Zen master once said, "When I die, I will not go anywhere. I will simply breathe out and not breathe in again." Simple, peaceful, natural. What dies is not the self, because the self was never truly born. What dies are the conditions that supported this moment of appearance. And what remains is what always remains, the law of cause and effect, the interconnected fabric of being. So let death not be a cliff in your imagination, but a curve in the road. You are not vanishing. You are continuing. And in that recognition, there is peace, not just at the end, but right now. Because when we stop fearing the transformation of death, we begin to embrace the transformations of life. We become less afraid of endings, more open to letting go, more willing to change, and perhaps more compassionate with others, knowing that every form we love, every person we hold dear, is not here forever. And yet, they are never truly gone. Like echoes in a canyon, like the scent of fire on clothes long after the fire's gone. We remain in each other. Chapter 5. The Freedom of Living Beyond Birth and Death. We've traveled far in this exploration, through fear, impermanence, identity, karma, and dissolution. We've unraveled the illusion of a fixed self and stepped beyond the rigid boundaries of birth and death. But all of this leads to a single, quietly profound question. What does this mean for how we live right now? It's easy to treat philosophical inquiry as a kind of mental exercise, to understand these teachings conceptually, to nod in agreement, and then return to daily life as usual. But Buddhist wisdom doesn't aim to merely educate the mind. It seeks to liberate the heart. So what happens when we truly see that there is no solid self, no unchanging me, that was born or that will die? What shifts when we realize that death is not an end, but a transition? And what freedom arises when we stop clinging to permanence in a world built on movement? The answer is simple, and yet it changes everything. We begin to live with peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from comfort or control, but the deeper peace that arises when we stop fighting what is. When you know that everything is impermanent, you stop taking life for granted. You begin to see each moment as precious, not because it will last forever, but precisely because it won't. The morning sun becomes a miracle, the sound of laughter a fleeting gift. Even pain, even sorrow, they're no longer enemies, but passing guests in the house of awareness. This is what it means to live without fear. Not to become numb or indifferent, but to open so fully to the reality of change that you no longer need to resist it. You don't clutch at joy, and you don't flee from sadness. You allow both to arise and pass, like waves on the ocean. And from this equanimity, something beautiful begins to bloom, compassion. Because when you understand that there is no separate self, no isolated you, then the boundaries between self and other begin to dissolve. You see yourself in the face of the stranger. You feel the suffering of others not as an abstract tragedy, but as your own. This is the teaching of interbeing, that we are not alone in our suffering and never have been. Every life touches every other. Every word ripples outward. Every choice plants a seed in the soil of the world. So when we stop asking, what happens after I die? And start asking, how can I live so that others may suffer less? We begin to touch something sacred. This is where Buddhist practice becomes not just philosophy, but path. It offers more than ideas, it offers direction. Meditation helps us sit with our thoughts, feelings, and sensations, not to escape them, but to see through them. To notice that we are not our fear, not our cravings, not even our stories. We are the awareness that watches, the space in which all arises. Mindfulness brings us back to this moment, the only place life truly happens. It teaches us to walk gently, to eat slowly, to breathe with presence. It is not a technique, it is a way of being fully here. Ethical living, through the precepts of non-harming, truthfulness, and generosity, creates the karmic conditions for future peace. When we live in alignment with wisdom, we stop planting the seeds of regret. We stop fueling the cycles of pain. And at the heart of all this is letting go. Letting go of the need to be someone. Letting go of the fear of ending. letting go of the illusion that anything can be held forever. Letting go is not passive. It's not resignation. It's an act of radical trust, a trust in impermanence, in interdependence, in the unfolding of reality itself. And in that trust, we begin to experience something that cannot be taken away: freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever we want, but the freedom from needing things to be a certain way in order to feel whole. The freedom to love without fear of loss. The freedom to act with kindness, even when no one sees. The freedom to die without clinging and to live without regret. This is the gateway to what the Buddha called nirvana, not a paradise, not a reward, but a state of complete peace. It is the extinguishing of the fires of ignorance and craving. It is the ending of the illusion that we are separate, that we must grasp, that we must fear. And yet, nirvana is not far away. It is not after death. It is not elsewhere. It is here, now, waiting in the space between your thoughts, waiting in your breath, waiting in the simple awareness of what is. Because when you stop chasing permanence, you begin to dwell in truth. When you let go of the false self, you return to the mystery of being. And when you no longer fear death, you begin, perhaps for the first time, to truly live. To live beyond birth and death is not a fantasy. It is a shift in perception. It is the softening of the ego, the slowing of the grasping hand, the awakening of the heart that no longer says mine, but simply says thank you. We walk through life collecting names, titles, memories, and attachments. But in the end, what remains? Not our possessions, not even our bodies. What remains is the quality of our presence, the depth of our love, and the seeds of peace we have sown in others. And so, the final teaching is not one of escape, it is one of return. A return to the present, a return to simplicity, a return to awareness that does not cling. The Buddha never asked us to become something else. He simply invited us to stop pretending we are something we're not. And when we do, when we let go of birth, of death, of self, we find not emptiness, but fullness. Not despair, but clarity. Not nothingness, but the freedom of being exactly what we are. Alive, changing, free.